Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, or whenever you may be tuning in to the Growing Our Future podcast. As always, we just enjoy bringing this podcast to teachers and students and stakeholders across the country that just want to listen in. And, you know, we like to say that if you want to know what the future is, grow it. Well, how do you grow something? You got to plant seeds and you got to take care of them. And that's why bringing on special guests is so special to us, because our guests share with us seeds of greatness, seeds that we can put in place in our lives that'll grow great things. And today is no different. Today we have an incredible guest. Ladies and gentlemen, you can meet presidents and elected officials, and you can meet movie stars and athletes, but I will tell you, very seldom will you ever get to meet the Grand Duke of a foreign country. And today we have the Grand Duke himself, Bill Sarpalius. I'm going to tell you more about that here in just a little bit, and he's going to share how he got that title. Ladies and gentlemen, Congressman Bill Sarpalius. Congressman, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Aaron. It's good to be with you.
This is going to be fun. We're going to talk about a lot of great stuff. We're going to talk about your FFA journey and how you ascended to the ranks of U.S. Congressman, and how you captured that title, Grand Duke of Lithuania. But before we do that, Congressman, we start every episode off with the same question, and you get the same question everybody else gets, and that is this: what are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful for everything. I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful to be living in a free country that anybody can dream any dream and make their dream come true. I'm grateful that I have good health. I'm grateful for my family, for my church, for my friends. I mean, I'm grateful for everything in my life. I'm not disappointed about anything. I've been blessed beyond my means.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And I will tell you, isn't it fun to be around people that are grateful? Isn't it fun to be around people that are hopeful, people that are positive, people that have energy? I think to everything that you said, this liberty that I have, my family, my friends, my job. I mean, there's some negative out there. I get it. But there are so many other things to be positive for, and I think it's encouraging to hear folks like you share that positivity. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, everybody chooses life, and they make life the way they want it. It's their choice. You and I both have seen people who are mad at the world, and they're very negative on the future, and that negativity that they have is of no value. It's nothing, and nothing. But somebody that is positive and looks at life in a positive way has a positive future. Life is what you make it.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. What they say, I think there's an old saying that says your vibe attracts your tribe. Well, I'm glad that we have a positive vibe, and I'm glad that we have surrounded ourselves with positive and hopeful people, because I am hopeful. You know, one of the quotes that I like to use is a quote by Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln said that the philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next. So if you want to know what the future is, grow it. Well, Congressman, you coming on the show today and knowing that FFA members, both in the great state of Texas and across the United States, are going to get introduced to your story. And you're going to be able to share with them your FFA journey and how you accomplished some things in life and how you allowed God to use you to do some great things. So with that, let's don't waste any time. Let's just jump right into that journey. Why don't you take us back to Houston, Texas, to you and your brothers and your mother, and tell us how your FFA, your senatorial, congressional, and international journey began.
Like I said, Aaron, I've been blessed beyond my means. my dad was in the Air Force, and we were based in Houston, Texas. While he was in the Air Force, he was a navigator for B-52 bombers. And we lived in Japan. We lived in different places across the country, but we were stationed, he was stationed at Ellington Air Force Base in Houston. Houston has a lot of good memories, but it was, I started life, I guess, kind of rough. I got polio as a young boy. And polio at that time struck a lot of young kids. And what it does, that disease, it shrinks your muscle, all your muscle tissue, and you get to where you can't walk. If any of you ever saw the movie Forrest Gump, when Forrest is running and he has braces on his legs, that's polio. And unfortunately, I got it, and my legs shrunk, my arms, my legs. I can remember when I could take my fingers like that, run them up and down my arms and legs and never touch the skin. But I survived that disease. But unfortunately, I started school late. I have two younger brothers, Bobby and Carl. Bobby started school before me. So by the time I finally started school, I was 2 years behind. And my dad left when I was 10, and he walked out the door. I never saw him again. And my mother was a severe alcoholic, depressed, suicidal, had tried to take her life several times in front of me and my brothers. And so we became homeless. We lived in vacant houses. We dug food out of trash cans. We just moved from house to house. And we never went to the same school for an entire year. We just moved around. And so finally, when I was 13 years old, the courts had gotten involved, and we were placed at Cal Farley's Boys Ranch, which was started by Cal Farley, and it was a home. His goal was to help the bottom 10%. So Aaron, you and I were both in the bottom 10%. So we really didn't have much to go except up. And when I came to Boys Ranch, I was 13 years old. I was in the 5th grade and couldn't read. I was tall, skinny, behind in school, and was a prime target to be bullied in school. And Boys Ranch was not an easy place to grow up. I lived in a dorm with 36 boys. There were about close to 400 kids that lived at the ranch at that time. Half of the kids had committed violent crimes. So it was a rough environment, but they had some good teachers, and they had some good staff, and they had people who cared. And Cal Farley was a smart man. He had a small teacher-student ratio, and he saw the value of the FFA. And so we had a very, very active FFA chapter. Now, Boys Ranch, not only did we have an FFA chapter that was large, but we also started to produce most of the food that we consumed. At one time, we were producing close to 80% of all the food we consumed. Mm. Now, when I went there, we milked cows by hand. When I left, we had fancy milking machines. And so anyway, I got exposed to the FFA, and I thought, who are these kids in these blue and gold jackets, with their name on them? And how do I get one of those? What do I got to do? And the jacket was the selling point. And I wanted a jacket. Every boy did. And they told us, well, you get in this program, and then you have to raise an animal. You have a project, is what we called it. And usually you started out raising a pig. And so I enrolled in the FFA. I was so shy at the time, Aaron, I could not stand up and say my name. I was just extremely shy. And but as you know, one of the first things you have to do in the FFA is stand up and say the FFA creed. And that was a lot for me to do. But I got a pig, and I had to get up every morning and go feed that pig and make sure it had clean water. And it began to teach me responsibility, which is I think one of the real assets of the FFA. It teaches you responsibility. If you don't feed that hog, if you don't water those crops, if you don't take care of your project, it will die. And then we had to keep records. How much money did it cost for the feed? So I got exposed to keeping records, and which was something you use for the rest of your life. So the FFA had so many lessons that you learned that are really the principles of life. It taught patriotism. Every time you'd stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning of a meeting, we used Robert Rules of Orders, which is organization. It teaches you that. There's so much good that comes out of the FFA, and it's kind of back to what we were talking about. It's what you make it. You and I both have witnessed a lot of kids who grew up through the FFA program who have become very successful in their own way in different areas. And we've also seen kids who didn't take advantage of it. So the FFA opened the door for me. And my senior year at Boys Ranch, during FFA week, the FFA chapter conducted the church services. We had the choir, all kids wearing their blue and gold jackets in the choir. And I was asked to give the sermon, which was the first time I ever got up and gave a talk ever. And it was on February 19th. And I went to the chapel, and I had written this sermon out, and it was titled Being Prepared for Death. It was about salvation. And one of the boys came and got me. He said, Mr. Farley wants to see you. And every Sunday when he came to the ranch, he would stand at the door on the steps of the chapel and shake hands with every boy that walked into the chapel. And that was a big deal. And so I stood there and I was shaking, holding that piece of paper, and Mr. Farley saw me, and he came up to me and he said, I'm looking forward to hearing what you got to say. He said, you're going to do just fine. And then he put his hand on my shoulder. He said, Bill, let me give you a little advice. He said, don't look at any boy in the eye. Look over the tops of all their heads and save me a place in the dining hall, which was a big deal. He was going to sit next to me in the dining hall. We went from church to the dining hall for lunch, and got time for the services to start. We walked in, and the choir got in their place, and I walked in, and I looked at Cal Farley, and he leaned next to a boy beside him, and he slumped down and he passed away. He died of a brain hemorrhage. And I watched him carry him out the back of the chapel. I knew I couldn't give that talk. I had to, at that moment in time, when he died, my life began. And I had nothing going for me. I was going to graduate from high school in 3 months. I was towards the bottom of my class. I had no job, had no home to go to. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. But I talked about how Cal Farley was a giving man, how he gave each of us. If we needed clothes, he gave us clothes. If we needed a bed, he gave us a bed. He gave us opportunities, and he would do anything to help that bottom 10% of kids. Well, I went back to my dorm like every boy did, and I cried and sat on my bunk, and I began to analyze my life and saw where I didn't know what I was going to do. So I just got down on my knees and I asked the good Lord to take me and use me in some way to help people. Well, 2 months later, I was elected area FFA president. And got off a bus in Amarillo when I graduated, Had one suitcase, $100 in my pocket, no place to go. But the FFA, being area president, I had to travel and speak to FFA banquets, the same as you've done. Any officers in the FFA, what's so neat is you can climb in leadership roles. And it depends on you and how hard you work at it. Well, anyway, I wound up hitchhiked down to Clarendon, Texas, and was trying to go to college. I had no money. I had a bunch of different jobs, rode a school bus, was a disc jockey in a little radio station. I fed hogs and drove tractors, and I just didn't know how I was going to make ends meet. And so my ag teacher said, you know, if you get elected state president, you'll get a scholarship. So that was my motivation. So I ran for state FFA president and got elected. And I did the same thing you did, Aaron. I spent a year driving all across Texas in an automobile. That car, I'll never forget, the executive director asked me when I was going to have a business card made. He said, what do you want to put down for your address? I said, I have no address. I said, I'm going to just live in the car. So that's literally what I did. I'm sure you did the same thing.
Sure.
You just live in the car and you go from town to town and you promote the FFA and it was a great opportunity. And then of course, doors continue to open for me. I was at the state FFA convention the year when we approved girls in the FFA. That was a very significant convention because we approved girls being in the FFA, but we also changed reapportionment. At that time, every state in the nation only had 2 delegates. Here, Texas made up like 25% of the national enrollment, but we only had 2 voices. So we changed that year, and that was very significant. But it was the FFA that helped build my foundation towards a political career. And I went on and became a vocational ag teacher, taught at Boys Ranch for several years. I'll never forget when I came in as an ag teacher, you know, I wanted to train the parliamentary and procedure team. You know, I was a past state FFA. I knew how to do this. He said, no, you're a rookie teacher. You'll take the junior farm skills team and you get the leftover kids. So I had 3 boys and one of them stuttered very bad. And I thought, how in the world am I going to take these 3 boys and one of them stutters and develop a farm skill for them? But I did, and they worked at it, and they wound up winning 2nd in state.
Wow.
And the boy that stuttered because of that program, he never stuttered again.
Wow.
It changed his life, that one FFA program being involved in. It built self-confidence for him. And, but it was, I enjoyed teaching a lot. My mother committed suicide, and she actually died on March 2nd, 48 years ago, and she was 48 years old. But that's when I decided to run for public office, because I had taken my mother when I left Boys Ranch and was trying to find a place to help her. And we hitchhiked across Texas, and there was none. Texas ranked 50th nationwide in alcohol and drug treatment. There was not a single place in the state of Texas that an alcoholic or drug addict could go to get help, unless if you had money. So I decided to run for the Texas Senate. That was my passion. I wanted to do something about that problem. And I announced and started my campaign with $25. Had 0 name ID, running against an incumbent who used to be a congressman. And, but because of the FFA, I learned how to work. And because of the FFA, I knew how to give it my all. And because of the FFA, I never gave up. And I got elected. And then I served in the Texas Senate for 8 years and was chairman of the Ag Committee my freshman year.
Wow.
And actually, I went and hired my ag teacher, Guy Finstead, to come help me with that program. We were all new. We didn't understand. In the Texas Senate, we only have 31 senators. Well, all of them but 3 were attorneys. I wasn't an attorney. I was an ag teacher. But we got a lot done in those years. And also, fortunately, we created a new state agency that set up alcohol and drug treatment centers all across Texas. And it's continues to help a lot of people who face that disease. And then the congressional seat opened up. I ran for that, and I had carried this bill as a state senator to have mandatory penalties for anybody who sold drugs to minors. And these drug dealers hired a hitman and came up to me. I never saw his face, and he hit me and knocked me down in a crowd, kicked me and busted my jaw here and here. So I walked out holding my jaw, my hands, and went into surgery, and they wired my mouth shut. And everybody thought that was it.
Now, this is when you're campaigning?
It's when I'm campaigning.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But I went ahead and campaigned. The FFA does not teach you to give up. You may hit some hard times. You just pick yourself up and keep going. But I remember doing live debates on television with my mouth wired shut. But I would hold the mic like this, and I'd say, I'm the only guy running for Congress that will keep his mouth shut. But I won, got elected, and then went to the U.S. Congress and was appointed on the Ag Committee, which was a great opportunity. And I served with some giants in agriculture, Charlie Stenholm, Kika de la Garza. I mean, some real leaders in agriculture.
Yes.
But all that became available to me just because I took advantage of what the FFA has to offer. And you don't look for excuses in life. Everybody's got an excuse. You don't accomplish anything looking for excuses. This old saying, you got to cowboy up. And when times get bad, you just keep going. And you prove everybody else is wrong. You prove that you can become whatever you want to become.
So you're in what an incredible story. And there's so many things that we could take off here and talk about. So many experiences in the Texas Senate. We won't pursue all those today, but I will tell you that this man right here as a state senator probably saved agricultural science education in the FFA in the state of Texas. It was on the chopping block. And thank God that God gave him a reason to run for office to help people like his mom. But in the process, he also helped the ag science and FFA. And then he goes on to serve in the U.S. Congress. And he's serving on the Ag Committee. He's on the Small Business Committee. And on a side note, I had the honor of working for him. And that's, we have an experience there that we may get around to talking about. But I think probably one of the most unique things that happened was the day that a guy by the name of Dr. Landsbergis came to your office. And that started a chapter in your life that you probably could have never expected. Tell us what happened when he came to see you that day.
Well, it's kind of interesting, Aaron. That day I got on my knees and I asked God to take my life and use me in any way that I can to help people. He just brought them to me. He just gave me the opportunities to try to help people. And that was one of them. I was in office about 10 days, and this tall man from Lithuania walks into my office. And my name is a Lithuanian name, but I knew nothing about my background. And he was a music teacher from Vilnius. And he told me about my uncle, who was a famous composer of music and had written a lot of music that was a lot of the people in Lithuania knew about. And so I learned a lot about my family through him. And then I asked him, I said, what are you doing here? And he was head of a new political party called the Sąjūdis Party. Now, I know a lot of the people listening to this podcast probably don't know much about the Communist Party in Russia and what the Cold War was all about and what the Soviet Union was doing and the threats that they made to the US and to other countries around the world. But at that time, if you were a member of the Soviet Union and you lived in the Soviet Union, the government told you what you were going to do. You did not go to church. Going to church was illegal. Mm-hmm. You did not have any freedom of speech or freedom of press. You were owned by the government. Mm-hmm. And that's the type of lifestyle that these people were living in. Mm-hmm. So he wanted to put the Sąjūdis Party on the ballot against the Communist Party. And he told me, he said, if we could just do it, he thought that they could get a majority and would win, and the Soviet Union and Lithuania and the Sąjūdis Party would break away, and then Estonia and Latvia would follow, which are the Baltic states, and then Georgia and Ukraine and Romania, and it would lead to the collapse of the Soviet Empire. Well, if you'd have been in my office at that time and heard that, you would have thought he was crazy. That's just unheard of. Mm. So I started helping him. Mm. And I kind of learned the ropes of Congress. Being a former state senator was helpful, but I started building coalitions. I started giving speeches on the floor. I started doing everything I possibly could to help the Sąjūdis Party. And they started getting a lot of publicity all around the world about this little party that was going to be on the ballot against the Communist Party. So they always had elections, but there was only one party, the Communist Party. Mm. And so President Bush Sr. appointed me and 3 other members of Congress to represent the United States to go observe those elections. So we flew into Berlin, and the Soviets took our passports and visas away, and we could not leave our hotel room. Well, that was right at the time when the Berlin Wall collapsed. Mm. I saw that. Mm. I mean, the time I arrived in Berlin, they had already, it was just a few days earlier, they had already come over the wall. But I saw everybody from east go to west, and it's like the world changed in that city. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing all these people who came over, and there were these crosses and names on the other side of the wall. And many times people had tried to escape, but you never knew if they made it. Mm. And I remember seeing these people standing by these names and crying because they knew either it was their husband or their son or somebody tried to reach freedom, but didn't make it. Mm-hmm. We take freedom so much for granted in this country. Mm-hmm. And so finally, we held a press conference in the hotel lobby, and it was covered and was all around the world. It was hit everywhere around the world. And the Soviets finally decided to let us in for 16 hours. We got into Vilnius in Lithuania, and my friend, Dr. Landsbergis, was elected president.
Wow.
The Sąjūdis Party, for every Sąjūdis candidate, they had 30 communist candidates. Mm. But they were able to do it. And the Sąjūdis Party won, and they broke away from the Soviet Union. And we got in a school bus, and with the new leaders, And we went to this town right outside Vilnius to get a Catholic cardinal out of prison who'd been in prison for over 45 years. And we came back to Vilnius, and in that bus, they were asking us, how do you set up a government? How do you elect a speaker? You know, what can we do for our economy? You know, now that we're a country, what are we going to do? How do we organize it? And fortunately, one of us, we had brought a copy of our Bill of Rights, our Declaration of Independence, that had been translated into Lithuanian language.
Wow.
And we discussed all that on that school bus. We came back into Vilnius with the cardinal. Oh, I wish you could have seen what I saw, Aaron. There were thousands of people surrounding this old Catholic cathedral that they had not had mass in that church for over 50 years. Mm-hmm. They turned it into a museum for the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. And people were crying everywhere. And we went into that church and they had mass for the first time. And you have no idea what it's like to have freedom of religion until you lose it. Mm. You don't know what it's like to see until you're blind, or to walk until you can't walk. There's so many precious gifts that we take for granted every day. And life is a journey, but what you make of it is dependent on you. But I saw that happen. And then, of course, Estonia and Latvia broke away, and I went and met with Boris Yeltsin when he was in hiding, and I saw the Soviet Empire collapse. Well, years later, the country gave me their highest honor that they could give a non-citizen, and they made me their Grand Duke. So that's how I got that title. With that, we could probably get a cup of coffee in Vilnius. But it's an honor I'm very proud of.
Well, I will tell you both as a friend and a mentor, very proud of you. And I think that you're a great example of the power of that blue and gold jacket. That when you zip that jacket up, you look just like everybody else. And what you do inside that jacket's up to you. And, I think that there's something to be said when passion meets purpose. There's a lot of people that are passionate, but they don't have their focus on the right purpose. And then I think there's some people that have a purpose, but they just aren't real enthused about it. They don't have a passion. But I think when passion meets purpose, I really think that's when God can use somebody. And there's no question that God put things in your life that became hurdles for you to get over, because he knew that you were about to take on some of the largest hurdles, not only domestically, but in the world. You took on the hurdle of ag education in the state of Texas. You took on the hurdle of freeing people. And, one of the things, and you've been around our foundation ambassador kids, so you know this fine group that we work with in the summertime. And one of the things that we teach them is the essence of leadership is to plant trees under whose shade you may never sit. That's the essence of leadership. And Congressman, you have planted some incredible trees. And there will be generations, both domestically and internationally, that will have a better life because of what you did. And so the day Cal Farley died and you hit your knees, God answered your prayers. Just don't ever forget that.
He did.
Because you have made an incredible difference. Again, we could go on. I'm telling you, folks, we could tell you all kinds of stories. This guy, he and I had the pleasure of working for him for 6 years. We both grew up at Boys Ranch. Today's not about my story. Today's about his story. We both had the pleasure of serving as state FFA president. And I remember when Mike Rowe, the Dirty Jobs guy, I remember when Mike Rowe was on the podcast, and he taught me about the word broadcast and how it was really a farming term, because it meant we're scattering things, we're scattering seeds. And here we have this incredible podcast called the Growing Our Future podcast. And guess what you did today, Congressman? You helped spread some more seeds of greatness.
Well, like I said, life is what you make it. Life goes by so fast, Aaron.
Yeah.
And all of us, especially those young students that are watching, you better enjoy it while you got it. Take in everything you can. This you see right behind me here is an old Wurlitzer jukebox. Plays old 78 records. Most kids probably don't even know what a 78 record is. It only plays 24 songs. And today you have all the knowledge in the world right in front of you. So there's no excuses. Time goes by so fast. Look at that change in technology. And it's going to change even more in their lifetime. So I'm jealous. I'm jealous of every student that's looking at this. I wish I was in your shoes.
Yeah. Like I said, we could take off on so many topics here. Real quick, just because you brought that Wurlitzer up, which I remember when you bought that Wurlitzer. Real quick, just I want to tell everybody, watch this. Y'all ready for this here? How many years did it take to get to 50 million viewers, constituents, users? Think about this. You ready? How many years to get to 50 million? Here we go. Radio, it took 38 years. Television, it took 13 years. The internet, it took 4 years. iPods, when iPods first came out, it took 3 years to get to 50 million users. When Facebook was introduced, it took less than 1 year to get to over 200 million users.
Wow.
Technology and the transfer of information. But Bill, something that you said, and I sure hope people heard it. You can have access to all the information in the world. But if you don't do something about it, if you don't reach down and say, I want to find me a purpose, I'm going to find something I'm passionate about, and I'm going to serve somebody else. If you don't do it, you're just a number in a series. I tell people, don't be a placeholder. God did not create you to be a placeholder. God created you for something great.
There's one other thing, Aaron. If you look at people's tombstones, it has the date they were born and the date they died with a line in between. What did you do in that line?
The dad.
So that's your life. That's your life. And I've always told people, what you accomplish for yourself in life has no meaning. It's what you give of yourself in service to Him and in service to other people. Give of yourself to your friends, to your family. Life is about giving. It's not about taking. I mean, our FFA model, I love our model. Learning to do. You're learning as a student to do. Earning to live. What you've learned, you earn how to live with it. And then you're living to serve. And that's what life is all about. It's in service.
Well, there's so many things we could talk about. I mean, I'm telling you, folks, we could go on
together again, Aaron.
But we'll go ahead and start wrapping this one up. I appreciate your grateful heart. I appreciate your encouragement to others. I do agree with you. The circumstances that we came from were very blessed. And I think God gave you the platform that He gave you. He's given me the platform He's given me. And I hope that we continue to be able to serve in those capacities. Before we wrap up, I always ask somebody, my guests, a fun question. So here's your fun question. What is the best concert you've ever been to?
Oh, Elvis Presley.
What? You saw the King?
Saw him 3 times.
No way.
He was an entertainer at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo the year I was state FFA president.
No way.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. How long have I known you? I didn't realize you saw Elvis 3 times.
Yeah.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, he put on a show.
I'm jealous. I'm jealous.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for the Growing Our Future podcast. This right here is just another example of why I love my job and why I love the fact that we're able to gather. We have this incredible media to share. We live in this incredible country to listen, to learn, to grow, to be better, to help our fellow man, and to bring on special guests like Congressman Bill Sarpalius, the Grand Duke of the country of Lithuania. Until we meet again, go out and do something great for somebody. And remember, don't ever forget, if you want to know what the future is, grow it. Plant seeds of greatness, take care of them, and grow an incredible tree that others can sit under, enjoy its fruit, and pass down to the people that follow in their footsteps. Until we meet again, everybody be safe.
Thank you.